Africa. They took us away from Africa, across the ocean. They took us away from Africa. Oh yeah, they took us away.
Hello Esther.
Hello.
We were here on a day on reparations here in Holland, in the Netherlands. And can you tell us something what reparations is all about in a few words?
Yes. Reparations simply means to repair the harm, and it's commonly associated these days with people of African heritage and the fact that we still have not been able to be repaired as a result of chattel enslavement, colonialism and its modern day legacies. So it's still affecting us today. And so because of that, when people think about reparations, that's really, I think, the key example that people often speak of, and it's for some reason considered to be one of the most controversial examples as well. Even though it's a very common principle, reparations is something that is part of international law. There are many other groups and peoples who have been struggling around the cause of reparations. So it means to repair the harm, and it means repairing everything. So it's holistic, it's about economic repairs, cultural repairs, political repairs, self-repairs, repairs in our identity, repairs to our environment, repairs in our institutions, in our legal systems, our family traditions, our spiritual systems. So it encompasses all the dimensions of human activity, as well as how we as humans interact with our environment and the earth.
Why is it that controversial?
Well, it's not controversial for me, but for some reason with the African case, it seemed to be controversial. Maybe because there's an attempt to reduce it to just being about money. And so that is often presented as being the main narrative, that all we want is money. And in Europe, where there is many austerity measures, that is seen to be controversial because
Thank you very much.
It's because of that. It's because we are minoritized populations in Europe, people of African heritage. It's presented in a way that is sort of deemed to be divisive to the majority populations who tend to be Europeans or Caucasians. And especially when you're seeing many European governments themselves going through austerity measures and sort of reductions in public services, it's a way of keeping the people divided, because if it is seen that somehow all we want is money, when the European people will say, well, we're also suffering too, we're also feeling it, and we're also giving enough money to you all in aid. That is the narrative. And as long as that happens, it means that we're not able to reach the hearts and minds and sort of mobilize the rest of, the human family in support of this cause, which is ultimately about justice. And so there's a lot of bridge building that needs to be done. There's a lot of proper education that needs to be done. And we can't leave that in the hands of elites and sort of political leaders and economic leaders. It must be done by the people, because it's the people that are feeling it. And ultimately, the struggle for reparations is a struggle that is not only going to benefit African people and people of African heritage. Our struggle is going to end up benefiting other peoples as well, because it's going to be about systemic change and transformation, structural change, and so that is not just going to be about us. And so yes, it's a movement that we're working very hard in terms of international solidarity. We also in Europe, and in particular in the UK, have been articulating a perspective on reparations that's called intercommunal reparations. And what that really speaks to is the fact that there are different peoples who've got their own reparation struggles. And in fact, we are one of the few constituencies within the African world that argue that even Europeans have their own reparation struggle. So for instance, in Britain, just like many other parts of Europe, the whole land reform movement, there are struggles of people trying to bring back commoning, yeah, because there was this serfdom and so forth, and so the ordinary people were always kind of, you know, treated as serfs, and so they've been dispossessed of land in Europe, which is why many of the so-called white working classes were misused to go and fight colonial wars of expedition, which ended up displacing and dispossessing Africans and other indigenous peoples. And so it's about us sharing our histories and sharing our stories and seeing how, you know, many of us have been misused, willingly or unwillingly, to actually fulfill agendas that actually go against our human interests as people.
Yes. For me, the first time I ever heard about reparations and also about the craze of repatriation was through reggae music.
Yes.
What's the link with reggae music and Rastafari and reparations?
Oh, huge link. I mean, the Rastafari as a nation have been one of the African diaspora communities who have been championing the cause of reparations for a very long time, from the beginnings of Rastafari. They are the ones in particular coming out of the Caribbean who reoriented us and made us remember our connection to our motherland. And so the struggle around repatriation, which is really restitution, you know, to be restituted to our homeland, to have restituted to us our rights of belonging, and that's not just physical repatriation, but the mental repatriation, the psychological, the cultural, the spiritual, the economic repatriation as well. And so Rastafari have played a huge role in keeping alive and raising African consciousness in the diaspora, and have been very, very influential at various points, you know, in reminding us about the system. It's the system that needs to change.
Babylon system.
Yeah, the Babylon system. There has been some co-optation of some members of Rastafari, as there has been in other powerful social movements that really have had the ability to capture the imagination. And that's one thing that we saw with reggae music. Reggae music was a vehicle not only for raising consciousness, but for challenging the system, for educating people as to, you know, who was the oppressor and, you know, what we were owed. And it was something that transcended our race, you know, our peoplehood. It was something that other peoples of the world and human family could also identify with and relate to. And so that became a powerful vehicle. And we've seen how reggae music, there's been all kinds of attempts to kind of make it lose that sort of conscious element that was really part of, you know, that emancipation, that self-emancipation, and that reclamation of our identity and our history and our culture and our power and our sense of we could do this. So we've seen that. So Rasta has made a huge contribution, and it's a contribution that needs to be recognised more, because for playing this role, many Rastafari have been demonised, still are quite demonised, not only in the Caribbean. And so it's kind of ironic now that we have CARICOM, nation states, taking up this issue and almost projecting themselves into the lead. And really what we need to do is to give deference to the independent of government social movement, which the grassroots movement, the central pillars of those movements have been Rastafari, the Pan-African movement, the Black consciousness and Black power movement as well, at various phases of our journey. And it's these kind of different forces that have been the true, I think, custodians of the vision of reparations, but also projecting the leadership and also, you know, conscientizing our people as to what reparations mean and what it will look like, and the fact that we still haven't achieved it. We still haven't achieved that liberation and that freedom. And in fact, you cannot separate liberation and freedom from reparations, because even though we know there's a social movement for reparations, at the core of it is that continued includes sort of liberation struggle for, you know, African reclamation of our dignity, our humanity, our status and our place in the world, but essentially a struggle around human freedom, peace, justice and equality.
Yes, can you state that the struggle for reparations will only end when justice for the whole planet has been reached?
Yeah, I
or
mean,
the different system, that this system has been removed?
It has to be a system, a new system, a new world. And so part of the damage is the existing world order. We need a new world order, we need a new economic system, a new political system, a new cultural system. And this is something that transcends nations, transcends people groups, it transcends borders. And there are sections within the movement that also argue that it must be anti-imperialist, it must be anti-capitalist, it must also be about rebalancing not only of human beings but also how we interact with nature and the environment. And so a lot of the extractive industries, a lot of the overconsumption, being disconnected from the land, being disconnected from the earth, this is part of the damage. And we as a people, as African peoples who have peopled the planet, have always kind of found common cause with other peoples who live in similar ways, the indigenous peoples, and in fact many of the peoples of Europe, the Caucasian European peoples of Europe also lived in this way before, you know, this beast of capitalism and neoliberalism now, neoliberal globalization in its current phase. And so in the UK in particular, we are very much organising within the African heritage communities, but also across communities, around a global justice approach to reparations. So we have something called the Global Justice Forum, and we work a lot with people in the environmental movement, movements such as the Land Is Ours, that are largely kind of Caucasian-led or dominated, but people who want to kind of have another world. Remnants of the Occupy movement, who are recognising that actually we, the 99%, or some people would say the 85%, are the ones that have to kind of take back control of our planet, of our earth, and of our civilization, basically, if we are to survive. So reparations is, I believe, a healing movement, a uniting movement, because it links into every issue, every struggle, every cause that is based on the principles of righteousness, which is about just right living. You know, there's a good way to eat and there's a bad way to eat. And so people shouldn't be scared of that term righteousness, but based on righteousness and ultimately justice, holistic justice, spiritual justice, cultural justice, economic justice, emotional justice, all kinds of justice. So that's really what it's all about.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.